All right, so we're going to get going here. Thank you for your patience. I'm Bethany Drysdale, Washoe County. Thank you. We know this was kind of last minute, but the point was that we know the storm is coming in, and we know that everybody wants to know how is the city prepared, how is the county prepared. In the North Valleys, the city of Reno primarily manages flood response for Silver Lake. Washoe County covers flood response for Swan Lake. So we will be talking about kind of two separate areas in the North Valleys. We have the experts here to address those specific areas. We know that the recent forecast from the National Weather Service is predicting a lot of rain, rain on top of a lot of snow, so it probably will be some localized flooding. So that's what our experts here will talk about. We want to talk about how this is different than 2017. A lot of people we know are saying, oh my gosh, 2017 all over again. It's not, and that's what we're going to explain. So from the City of Reno, we have Trina Magoon, Utility Services Director, and Travis Truehill, Director of Maintenance and Operations. From Washoe County, we have Dwayne Smith, Director of Engineering, and Eric, Engineering and Capital Projects, and Eric Crump, Operations Director. We also have Kelly Echeverria, who is our Emergency Manager for the county. So I would actually ask everybody to come up here briefly, and I think what's so important is that over the last several years, and through COVID too, we've really worked so well as a region, as a community. So these are the experts that will be speaking, and these, after this is all over, if you need some one-on-one sound bites, we can do that, and I'm sure you'll want to go out to the North Valleys and get your B-roll as well. As a reminder, we don't predict the weather. We're going to talk about what we'll do in response to the weather, but we're not going to talk about what to expect in the storm because we don't know, and we are not the National Weather Service. We'll leave that to the experts. So with that, we'll start with Trina Magoon from the City of Reno, and you don't have to wait up here if you guys don't want to.
Well, thank you so much, Bethany, and thank you all for coming here so we can describe what it is we're doing out in the North Valleys for flood control. So I just first wanted to start talking about the collaboration with Washoe County on our flood response in the North Valleys. Reno primarily manages the flood response for Silver Lake, and Washoe County primarily manages the flood response for Swan Lake. So I just have a graphic here showing both lakes, Swan Lake being on the west side of the valley, Silver Lake being on the west side of the valley, and Swan Lake being on the east side of the valley. So what's really important for our residents to know is what is different from 2017, as Bethany just mentioned. One of the things is that we've learned a lot from that 2017 event. Previously, we used to keep drainages open to allow floodwaters to reach the lowest point, which are both of the lakes. Now we operate towards containment of the lakes and making sure that residents don't flood. We have pumps, barriers, HESCOs, we plug culverts so we don't have backwater. Those types of things. And then really another important piece is that we've eliminated the lag time for flood response. We were reactionary in flood of 2017, just trying to get out there and respond to what was happening without knowing how bad it was going to get and what we needed to do. Now we have flood action plans. They're based on elevations. We have equipment ready to deploy. So that's a big difference. Next, the City of Reno has developed additional drainage regulations in the valley. We've changed the required volumetric mitigation for development to 1.3 to 1, meaning there's a 30% increase in the volume retained for that development's increase in imperviousness. We monitor the elevations of our lakes, so we know as we go through the seasons what those lake elevations are. City of Reno recently started a detention retention basin inspection program so we can ensure that the infrastructure we require our developers to provide is actually in working functional order. And then recently we developed the Silver Lake Flood Action Plan, and I'll go into that in a few minutes. A couple other important things we've done regionally, and this first two are primarily for Swan Lake. We developed the flow shave from the Reno Stead Water Reclamation Facility, where we divert up to 500,000 gallons per day of raw sewage from Riz Wharf, that's the Reno Stead plant, to Tum Wharf. And what that essentially does is it reduces the amount of effluent from Riz Wharf into Swan Lake. The second thing we did is we put in a pump and pipeline from Swan Lake up to the American Flat Farm. And what that does is during the summer irrigation season, we draw down the elevation of Swan Lake, allowing more floodwaters during the winter, more volume for floodwaters during the winter. On Swan Lake, the county has a camera on it with live, real-time viewing so that we know what the elevations are and what's going on. City of Reno is currently working on getting a camera to look at live, real-time for Swan Lake as well. Now I want to focus just real quick on Silver Lake, as this is Reno's primary responsibility. As you can see on the west half of the lake, it's primarily contained. There isn't a whole lot of floodplain in the developed area, and as opposed to the east side where we have more floodplain, where we have development, and so that's where we focus our efforts on our flood action plan for Silver Lake. We have 4 stages for that plan. We have a monitoring stage at elevation 4964, stage 1, 2, and 3 at 2 feet of consecutive rise in that lake elevation. We are currently at the monitor stage or real close to it, so we begin, monitoring the elevation, notifying commercial properties to get their infrastructure in order to protect their properties. We establish our rights of entry for those impacted properties. We begin coordinating our HESCO barrier installation, and we inspect and repair some of the infrastructure that we have, flood control devices that we have in place year-round. We have a couple of maps in our plan that continue with additional infrastructure as we rise in elevation. I won't go through these in detail, but stage 1, stage 2, you can see the progressive amount of infrastructure we install out there as we move through those. Next up, I will hand this over to Travis Truhill to give an update from our Maintenance and Operations Department on what it is they're doing today and looking forward to doing, as well as what we can expect our residents to help us out with. Travis?
Thank you, Trina. As Trina said, my name is Travis Truhill. I'm the Director of Maintenance and Operations for the City of Reno. Maintenance and Operations team's main objective is maintaining our city roadways, storm drain systems, and sewer systems. Our primary objective during flood operations is public safety and minimizing damage to private infrastructure and public infrastructure. Staff have been working around the clock and will be working around the clock during the entire operation to make sure that we're keeping our ditches, culverts, dams clear so that water has some place to go during this event. That's the priority here. As Trina mentioned, we've gained a lot of knowledge since 2017. We're much better prepared than we were in 2017. We have equipment on hand, materials on hand that we didn't have then. And we have a much better understanding of how the flood is going to move through the area. So what has the city really done to prepare for this coming storm and future storms? Staff, again, as I mentioned, have been clearing ditches for weeks now, making sure that they're free of debris and just things that will plug our inlets. We've set up 6 sandbag locations throughout the city, and these are fill stations for our citizens to be able to come in and fill up the sandbags, get what they need, bring back to their properties, and hopefully dam up any known low spots or problem areas they have within their property. We have repaired HESCOs and installed new HESCOs around Silver Lake. We have installed a gate valve at one of the storm drain pipes at Moy and Lear. This is intended to stop backflow of Silver Lake as it rises. Historically, the intersection of Moy and Lear has flooded, and so this hopefully will greatly reduce the flooding we've seen in this area. Crews have been actively working to prepare our 33 sanitary sewer lift stations, make sure that they're ready for increased load that will be put on the system, and to make sure that they're able to operate in the event of a power outage. Supplies on hand now that we didn't have last time. We have HESCOs available to us now that are in our possession. They weren't there in 2017. We have pumps that are set up now and in our possession that we didn't have in 2017. We also have sandbags, and we're just more prepared and ready than we ever were in 2017. We're also finally working with the Association of General Contractors to make sure that we have private contractors that have disposable to us if we need to activate them and get them operating to supplement city operations. So what we're going to be doing during the operation, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be working around the clock. Crews will be monitoring known problem areas. We'll be monitoring the ditches, the rivers, dam areas, basins. We're going to be actively clearing debris that may fill up in these areas as we go. We're going to be, our goal again is to really make sure that the water goes where the water is supposed to go. It's critical to us. Throughout this event, staff will be monitoring the event, working very closely with Trina's engineers to make sure that we're following the city's plan. As Trina mentioned, as water levels come up, we have certain trigger points of things that we will be doing around the city to secure properties, secure infrastructure. And then finally, as roadways kind of become inundated, they're unable to handle some of the large volumes of water should that happen. City crews will be closing down roadways just for public safety. And so we ask the citizens to really prepare for potential issues, just as we're trying to prepare for these issues. As I mentioned, we set up sandbag fill stations. We ask that the citizens take advantage of these. If you know you have flooding on your properties, come get the sand. The city provides the sand and the sandbags. We ask that you bring a shovel, fill up the bags, bring them back to your property, and do what you can to really try to keep the water out. The city can't be everywhere at all times, so we ask that if you do notice a problem, that you utilize the city's Reno Direct call service and let the city know that there's an issue. We will respond as quickly as we can. We also provide a lot of good information on our social media pages, so please follow us on social media. It'll give you a lot of good information about where we're seeing problems, where roadways are closed. And finally, we just ask that if you see a closed roadway, do not drive through it, do not walk through it. Nobody should be a spectator in these things. A lot of times the water is a lot deeper than you expect, and it's very hazardous. So at this point, I'm going to ask Dwayne Smith from the county to come on up.
Good morning. For the record, Eric Crump with Washoe County's Community Services Department. So much of what I say is duplicative on what Travis had shared, but it has been a big winter so far. The county's priorities are certainly public safety, the safety of our traveling public on the roadways, protection of our infrastructure, and then obviously protection of private structures. I first want to talk about what the county has done to prepare for the storms and all the other storms that we've seen throughout the winter, and then we'll roll into what the community can do. We've staged critical equipment. This is backhoes, loaders, mini excavators, those types of things. We've staged those throughout the county. They're ready to deploy at a moment's notice, and we can respond quickly to some of those trouble areas. So we have some staged in the south, some in the central, and some in the north. And again, those are staged at some of our critical areas. Over the last several weeks, we've put eyes on our ditches, our drainage inlets, culverts to make sure they're free of debris and they can flow. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the problems we anticipate rolling into this here pretty soon. We'll have crews on the ready. We'll be monitoring some of those trouble areas. We'll have crews ready 24/7 throughout the storm. And we have stocked 9 sandbag locations throughout the community, throughout all of Washoe County. And those are going to be critical. And that's a great segue into what the community can do. If anybody has experienced flooding over the last several years, you can probably expect it again. And now is the time that the community can prepare themselves for flooding. That's why we set up these sandbag locations in advance of the storms. The sand in the sandbag there is intended for residents. Just bring a shovel and do what you can to protect your property. We have a lot of snow and ice in our storm drain infrastructure right now. So obviously that's going to decrease our volume. It can help in certain situations. It acts like a sponge and takes on some of that precipitation, but it can also block our storm drain infrastructure. We have reduced volume, provides overtopping, and then we have water going over roadways, potentially on private property. So we'll be watching that very closely, but there's not a lot we can do about that other than respond if in fact that happens. Again, this is a community that needs to get together and help themselves. Washoe County is here to respond 24/7. If you see issues, please call us. You can call us by 311 or 328-2180. Our communications team does a great job of putting out social media, so please check in on that often. And we can't be everywhere all of the time. We will be monitoring those problem areas, but we rely heavily on our community to let us know what's going on there so we can respond. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dwayne Smith.
Good morning. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to share with you and help get this message out into the community how important it is that both Washoe County and City of Reno have been collaboratively planning for the event that that we expect to arrive over the next day or two. Flood preparation and planning is complicated, but it's part of what we do. So I want to assure the community that just as my partners before that you've heard speak to some of these issues and challenges, that we've been very proactive in making sure that we have our infrastructure prepared for the flooding potentials, that we've staged equipment, that we've prepared our people so that they can properly respond. We know with these events that we're going to have localized flooding. That is a fact. Just as Eric mentioned before, there's a lot of ice and snow that clogs and creates issues with our drainage networks and our channels. So while we have been preparing, we want to make sure that the community is also prepared and taking advantage of those things like sandbag locations. We'd also encourage people to report out if they see things. Prior to an event, if they see trash or debris in roadside ditches, we encourage people to remove that trash and debris because that trash and debris will ultimately clog drainage networks and can definitely lead to localized flooding. Once an event starts, that's a very different story. We do not want our community entering into any unsafe condition. We expect everybody to call us or call the City of Reno when these situations or events occur. When they see flooding, let the professionals go in and take care of that. Do not put yourself in unsafe situations. We heard Trina start the conversation off focused on the North Valley, so I too want to speak briefly about the things that Washoe County has been doing in collaboration with the city in preparing the North Valleys. Swan Lake experienced flooding in 2017, and that flooding, because of the closed basin, perpetuated for many years. Over the last couple of years, lake levels dropped to a point at which we were effectively able to remove flood barriers. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you, here we go again. Over the last 2 months, we have noticed and been observing increases in water levels at Swan Lake. So about a month and a half ago, we began proactive efforts to create barrier systems to protect the residents and the infrastructure around Swan Lake. Those infrastructure elements are now located away from roadways. They're located as far away from homes and businesses as possible. This is an effort, and what we learned from 2017 to place these protections in a way that doesn't impact the community, their day-to-day lives as they go to work and school. So a lot of the efforts that you'll see both currently and ongoing within our closed basins and specifically Swan Lake are designed to mitigate those impacts to the community while effectively protecting the community as well. So we have built new berms, we are installing HESCO barriers, we have installed pumps. We are ready for the next 24 to 48 hours of potential water surface rise in the Swan Lake area. But it doesn't stop there. So when the community continues to see equipment, continues to see Washoe County staff out working in and around Swan Lake, please know that we're not just focused on this set of storms, but also the future storms that we expect over the next through into the springtime. If you have any questions, we're more than happy to answer those, and I'll ask the team to join me up here.
Is the 4924, is that the current elevation, and similar to Silver Lake, is that in the monitor right now, or what stage is Swan Lake at?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for that. Yeah, please. Those water surface elevations that are shown there are the FEMA designated flood elevations for the lakes. Those are not the current water surface elevation. Give me just a second.
Sorry.
Yeah, I knew I was going to have to do this. Put on my glasses, that is. Currently, the water surface elevation of Swan Lake is 4919.4. This is a depiction of a very close. This is 4919.5. So this is about what the water surface elevation is in Swan Lake currently. I want to point out a couple of things. On the east, you'll see some areas that appear to be connected to the lake. With Washoe County's efforts, we have closed off this area, and this is not a connected area anymore. So this area on the east side of Lemon Drive near Arkansas is not connected to Swan Lake. The same is true up at the north. So you'll see that there's an area up around Lemon Drive in Idaho. That area above the Gene Way berm is also not connected to Swan Lake. It's been effectively sealed off from the rest of the lake, and so that area is now protected. This is in alignment with the comment that I made earlier that we have relocated the protections not along Lemon Drive, not along Idaho, but we have brought those protection levels in away from the roadways so that it reduces or minimizes the impact to our residents in and around Swan Lake.
If the water reaches the same level that it did in 2017, are you guys confident that we will not see the amount of flooding and damage in that area that we saw 6 years ago?
I think it's important to mention that the current water levels are about 4 feet below the high levels that we saw in 2019 and in 2017. So it's a much different set of circumstances than what we have today. Having said that, there is still a lot of water that sits up on the mountains surrounding us. And so we expect that water surface levels are going to increase both in Silver and in Swan Lake. That's why both the city and the county have been proactive in installing barrier systems, making sure that our staff is ready and prepared to deal with whatever may come. This doesn't change the fact that there may be localized flooding in areas above the lake. We saw this also in 2017 where water that was coming out of the mountains impacted roadways, impacted people's properties that had nothing to do with the closed basin Swan Lake and Silver Lake. So we do want to make sure that the residents stay vigilant. If they see these issues, please reach out, call the city of Reno, call Washoe County. Reno can be reached at Reno Direct, Washoe County at 311.
You guys aren't the meteorologists, but do you guys have projections for, at least with this storm, what the lake levels are supposed to rise to, and what are we projected to get to as of now? It's your turn.
I think you said it right. We are not the meteorologists, and we are not the ones who predict those lake levels. We had asked the National Weather Service to be here this morning. They were unable, so I recommend that you reach out to them.
What numbers are you working for? You guys have to have an idea of what you're looking at, right? So yeah, you're not the meteorologist, but there is a point where you guys have an expectation of where that might go to help you guys. What's that magic number for you?
So we don't have a magic number. The interesting thing about what we have in our watershed right now is a lot more snowpack than we typically would have prior to this event that we have coming. A lot of that, what we don't know is how much of that snowpack will soak up the rain as this event comes in. Also, what we don't have in this watershed are snow-tail sites. So we do not know the exact snow water equivalent that we have in this watershed. We have ones nearby at higher elevation that we can kind of compare to. But again, the city of Reno and Washoe County are not the ones who are predictive of what is happening to these weather events. We are responding to what we're being told by the entities that do predict the weather events.
Did you want to
add anything to that?
Yeah, if I could just add to that, because I think your Trina is absolutely right, but I think the question is important, and I hope our community understands what the city of Reno and Washoe County's approach here is. We've been in this mode for a while. We've learned a lot since 2017 about these closed basins and how they perform under these the flooding potential that we see in these types of situations. So we're very much in the measure and monitored response mode. And what I mean by that is as Trina said earlier, we are continuing to take water surface elevations, if not daily, every couple of days. We're looking at and working with the Weather Service and our regional partners to help understand what those snow levels and what that volume of water that sits up in and around the mountains are. We don't have exact numbers, but what we have is we have the ability to continue to measure the water levels, to continue to look at the natural drainages, to look at the potential impacts both from the current situation and what we've learned over the past 5 or 6 years, and then we're adjusting and managing to that. So the flood protections that both the city and the county have installed around these closed basins, those were done for this current storm. So the work and the effort that was done in the past numbers of weeks and months has been preparing us for where we're at today. The work that the city of Reno and Washoe County continue to do on Swan and Silver Lake respectively are for the next series of storms and for those potential issues that we'll see coming in the future. So while we don't know exactly what the water surface elevations are or what they will be, we've designed and taken an approach that will allow us to continue to raise those protections, install new protections as we see lake levels increase so that we can stay in front of that and protect our community, protect our infrastructure. I hope that helps provide a little bit of clarity.
And I just want to make sure it's clear for viewers in that area. So right now, we're at a certain level, so that's going to call for a certain stage of protection. So if that rises, then you're going to react to that rise in water with another stage. So it's not, you're not prepping for the worst, you're just trying to keep step by step with water levels in the stages, correct?
Yeah, it's much different, as I said, both what our region dealt with in 2017. In 2017, we were working in water, we were working within a situation that we weren't out in front of, we didn't have the ability to control that. That is exactly what we're doing now. We've established elevations of protection. So for instance, at Swan Lake, our current elevation of protections is around 4922 or just a little bit above that. 2 feet below the current water surface elevation, 4922 is about 1.5 feet below the current water surface elevation. So as we expect, we will continue to see lake levels rise. Then we'll send crews out and deploy additional protective measures depending upon how quickly those lake levels may rise. If you look at the water surface elevation data that's provided on the Washoe County website, you'll notice that Swan Lake has hovered around 4919.1 to 0.4 over the last numbers of weeks. So even though we've seen a lot of a lot of snow, and we've seen some runoff, the lake hasn't significantly changed. We expect that that's going to change over the next 24 to 72 hours. That's why those protection levels that are there in place, as well as what the city has done at Silver Lake, are there. If we continue to see additional elevation rise, then we'll continue to deploy and make additional adjustments to our protection levels so that we stay ahead of it. This is the response plans that both the city of Reno and Washoe County are working under.
Could you reiterate the new technology that we're seeing that we didn't see in 2017, what new technologies helping with this flood mitigation?
Was it something I was referencing in my?
Yeah.
We could go back to the slideshow.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure if we referenced new technologies. What we really have, as Dwayne has mentioned, is a plan based on elevations. And as the lake elevations rise, we have a plan to install additional infrastructure to protect the residents and businesses around those lakes. We do have cameras on the lakes. I believe that we didn't have that in 2017. We don't currently have one on Silver Lake yet, but that is anticipated, so we can keep an eye on that. The camera points at the lake. There's a staff gauge with elevation, so we can see as that lake, and we will have that on our website as well as the county has that theirs currently on their website. So even if we're not physically out there, any resident can take a look at that and understand what the elevation of Swan Lake is now, and soon, hopefully, what Silver Lake is.
How important are the new catch basins you put out, like Lemon Valley? You guys built those new water catch areas for runoff. So they'll collect, and instead of all rushing down, you've got like a barrier for development splashway before it goes down drainage ditches. It's up to the city, you know.
If you're talking about Lemon Drive, I think that might be the RTC project. I'm not sure.
Could you give an idea where?
Where we went?
The retention basin.
Yeah, that's what they're.
Maybe I would reaffirm your retention basin policies.
Yes.
So I believe what you're referring to are private infrastructure. So those are the required detention, or in the North Valley is the case of retention basins. And those are required for development to mitigate the increase in runoff due to that development. So what you're seeing in many areas, especially with the retention basins, is a ponded level of water. That water isn't spilling over into the roads. Those retention basins are supposed to hold water. If they're holding water, they're doing what they were designed to do. I would say the mitigation that we've done, or the increase in requirements that we've done since 2017, again, is increasing the required size of those retention basins from 1-to-1 volumetric mitigation to 1.3-to-1. And what that means is that we require 30% over what the increase is. And so that's retaining that water on site as opposed to letting it drain into these terminal lakes, Silver or Swan. Does that help answer
So
your?
those were there before you?
Some of them have existed in the watershed, but with new development, each new development has a new retention basin.
And you're hoping, I mean, that will also help with the flow down these drainage ditches to slow the amount of water coming.
Right, so in the North Valleys, we actually have retention versus detention. And so detention detains the water and meters it out slowly, and that works in a riverine environment where it's gonna go to, say the Truckee River. Up in the North Valley, since we have sinks or terminal lakes, there's nowhere for the water to go other than there and pond up and rise and either evaporate, or some of the other measures that we have, such as the pipeline up to American Flat Farm. These retention basins hold the water on site, and they're holding that increase of water that occurs because of development. So yes, they're holding that back so it never reaches the lake. Those infiltrate into the ground or evaporate instead of going to the lakes. Yeah, so we do have a fair number of retention basins that have existed in the watershed. This year the city of Reno implemented a new program to go out and inspect those retention basins. We have requirements that they be built, the contractors build them, and then we don't really have eyes on them. So what we did was create a program with a couple of people who go out and inspect them, ensure that they're in full working order and that they're functioning as they should be, so that we do make sure what's happening in the watershed doesn't affect what happens at the lake.
Question for the county, but what would your message be to a Lemon Valley homeowner whose house flooded in 2017? Understandably, they get really nervous whenever we start talking about an atmospheric river. What's your message to them? Be confident that it won't happen again.
Well, I think you bring up a great point, because that's really why we're here, right? We want to let the community know, make sure that they're that they understand that flood risk is always present. But they can understand that Washoe County and the city of Reno have been very proactive in planning for this flood that we're expecting over the next 24 to 72 hours. The protections that we put in place in 2017, after we put those in place and we were able to pump down the water behind those barriers, cleared the neighborhoods, allowed for people to successfully drive on roadways and gain access to their homes. That same protection approach and strategy is the same protection and approach strategy that is in place now, and will allow us to continue to provide protections for the roadways to allow emergency service providers to get into those areas, to keep those roadways open so that people can go to work, that they can go to school, and also protect their homes. The Washoe County Commission directed staff to make sure that we kept roadways open, that we kept water out of people's homes, that we protected public infrastructure. This is the strategy and the approach that we're taking. That's been a consistent effort since 2017. And what you're seeing today, and I hope what you're hearing, is a continuation of that work. And I really want to assure the residents that live in the area of the good hard work that both the county and the city are doing to do just that, to protect them, keep the roadways open, and make sure everybody's safe.
So I understand that as the lake levels rise, you guys are going to continue to increase those protections. Is there a point of no return? Is there a point where the lake level gets too high and you just say, hey, some of these residential areas are going to flood, we need to make peace with that?
I think that's a great point. And as we've said, we're talking right now about the North Valleys and about the two closed basins, Silver and Swan. But that condition that you're describing exists all throughout the county. So anywhere is subject to flooding. That potential exists. And so we want to make sure that residents are diligent, that they're taking advantage of the sandbag locations, taking advantage of the resources that are provided. And then during an event, if there is an issue, that they're reaching out and calling the city, calling the county, so that we can respond and try to take care of those efforts as much as possible. Our proactive planning has put people, has put equipment, has put resources at areas where we have historically have had historic flooding issues. And so those are the types of things that we plan for. As we move into this later part of the spring here, we're still in winter, but we're right around the corner. We don't expect to see some of the same types of impacts that we saw in 2017. But we want to make sure that the residents know if those conditions do return, if those conditions lead to flooding of the closed basins, that Washoe County and the city of Reno will continue to provide those protections that we've done historically.
So there's not a lake level you could share for Swan or Silver where you guys would know that there was going to be some damage?
Again, as I said, we expect that there's going to be localized flooding, and some of that may not be from the actual Swan or Silver lakes. It may be from drainages that come out of the surrounding hillsides and mountains. I'm not going to give you an elevation that is something that would be a level, because our approach, our measure and monitor and our response to those changing measurements really give us the ability and the flexibility to keep raising barriers, to keep providing pumps, to keep providing those protections. So our intent and our goal and our commitment is to continue to address changing conditions. So as we see water levels rise, we're going to continue to implement those protective measures.
Residents out in that area, we know the event's coming in later tonight. Obviously, you're gonna bring more people on standby, but can residents, both Washoe and Reno, expect to see crews out there waiting and ready to respond out in that area instead of having to call them in, wait, and have all of the time? Hard question, sorry.
No, it's a great question. City of Reno and Washoe County, we work around the clock. If things get wicked and it's the middle of the night, we will have people out there. We don't have enough resources to monitor every single problem area throughout the county, so we really have to respond. That's why we stage the equipment where we do. That's why we break up the crews like we do. That's why we coordinate very closely with the city of Reno and the city Sparks in Washoe County. So what I can tell you is, will there be somebody sitting there 24/7 waiting for something to happen? No, that's probably not a good use of our resources. But we've got equipment and crews ready to respond, pretty much at a moment's notice. We are strategic in terms of where we put our equipment. We're strategic in terms of where folks live that are on our crews, so we don't have somebody living in the south that's got to report up to the north. So we talk about those things, and I think it's really important to understand, what we've been doing over the course of the last 2 to 4 weeks was in preparation for something like we're going to see over the course of the next day. So hopefully what we've done will help with that.
and I can speak for the city of Reno, we're taking the same very similar approaches that the county is with our staff levels over this event. We will be working on a very scalable process with our employees. We have the opportunity to scale up to 3 and 4 times the amount of employees that we'll currently have on this current shift that we're working right now, should that need arise, and then scale back down as the storm event peters out. And we have equipment now and people that they know the hot spots, they know the problem areas, and those are going to be the areas that they're absolutely keeping an eye on all the time. We also have crews that will be driving around, kind of a rover crew that'll be going around and checking all the lesser problematic areas, but keeping an eye on those as well. So we will be, as the county is working around the clock through this entire event.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to add to that, City of Reno recently implemented a geographic information system, or GIS map, where calls that come in through Reno Direct are automatically populated on that map, and that helps us prioritize where the crews go and make sure that we are addressing, not that maintenance and ops didn't always do that, but it just helps make sure that we don't lose track of any of those, and we do have crews responding 24/7. We have maintenance and operations staff out there. We also have utility services engineering staff to understand what the condition is and determine if there's a longer term solution that needs to be addressed for those flooding problem areas.
In terms of roadways, are there any highly trafficked areas that you're keeping an eye on that could potentially be a commute impact for people?
In the city of Reno, most of the areas that we see problem areas are typically in the neighborhoods. That's where the inlets tend to, they need to be upgraded, and we need bigger capacity, and that's where you'll see a lot of the water backing up in the roadway systems. The major roadways tend to stay pretty clear and shouldn't really hinder commuting at all.
So these are the subject matter experts. They're going to be really busy over the next couple of days. So I hope you got all your questions answered. We'll try to continue to provide information throughout the week and the weekend. But if you need anything else, this is your chance, because after this, they're going to be actually out there doing what they do. So Rebecca and Cassie have handouts of the plan, of the City of Reno plan. The presentation is available as well. You can go to our website. We have, again, the Swan Lake camera. We have the elevations. We have our response, our storm response, just a ton of information there. You can always reach out to me for Washoe County. We've got Rebecca and Cassie for City of Reno. And if you need anything, just please do reach out. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I would just thank everybody for giving us an opportunity to get some information out to our communities. This is why we're here. Our community needs to know and have assurance that both the county and the city have been preparing for and are prepared to deal with situations as they come up over the next day or two. I'd also do a little shout out to our field crews. These are the men and women that are out doing all of the work, preparing for these events. And if the community members see them, off on the side of the road, please give them a wide berth. They're doing the good work for the community. Let them get in there and do those things and support a safe community.
And I would just like to add to what Dwayne just said. Thank you to the media for coming out and hearing our message and getting that out to our residents so that they understand that we, do have a plan. We are, working proactively and actively through this storm to keep our residents safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.